Hello and welcome back to A Real Horror Show, the YouTube channel dedicated to all things horror. So last week I was fortunate enough to attend the London premiere of Evil Dead Rise at the Prince Charles Cinema with a special Q&A with the film's director Lee Cronin after the screening. As a huge fan of the Evil Dead franchise, I can't begin to tell you how much of an amazing experience this was. I've never been to any kind of movie premiere event before, and since it was for the new installment of the Evil Dead franchise, that made it all the more special. Also, the director Lee Cronin is such a nice guy, and it was a real pleasure to meet the man behind this bloody movie. And I'm not just being British. When I say bloody movie, I really mean it. The film is an absolutely relentless gore fest from start to finish. Lee Cronin definitely understood the assignment, so let's talk about it. First things first. This is a very different kind of Evil Dead movie, mainly because Cronin takes us away from that iconic cabin in the woods setting that the Evil Dead series is known for, and sets his film entirely within an apartment building. Despite this change of location, the film does feel very claustrophobic, and since the characters are confined to this one setting, just like the cabin in the previous movies, it doesn't take away that feeling that you are watching an Evil Dead film. I also want to mention that the opening of this film really did give me chills. The music is extremely reminiscent of The Exorcist and The Shining, and features those horrifying shrieking violins and strings as the titles came up, which really did give me goosebumps. So, Evil Dead Rise follows the story of Beth, played by Lily Sullivan, who reunites with her sister Ellie, played by Alyssa Sutherland, a single mother of 3 children living in a high-rise apartment building in LA. After an earthquake rocks the building, the children discover a very unusual looking book in the building's foundations, along with some vinyl records. Naturally, curiosity kills the cat. The vinyl records are played, speaking aloud the demon resurrection passages that are inked in blood within the old book, unleashing that unholy terror into their world. Ellie is possessed by the evil, and it's up to Beth to protect the children from their own mother while stranded within this apartment complex. And of course, just like the 2013 Evil Dead reboot, this film does not feature Bruce Campbell reprising his iconic role as everyone's favourite chainsaw-handed hero, Ash Williams. Instead, Bruce takes a back seat along with the series creator Sam Raimi and Robert Tappert in executive producer roles. But do keep your ears open when you see this movie, because there is a very clever hidden cameo from Bruce. That said, the film does bring forward a very interesting new plot point in the lore of the Evil Dead films that connects Evil Dead Rise to not only Sam Raimi's original trilogy, but the 2013 reboot as well. Early on in the film, we find out that the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead, which is responsible for unleashing the Kandarian demons into our world, is actually one of 3 volumes. Cronin presents this idea that Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead trilogy is based around 1 book, Fede Alvarez's reboot is based on a 2nd volume of the Necronomicon, and of course Evil Dead Rise is based around the 3rd volume. I think this is a really clever and fantastic way of connecting all of the Evil Dead films in the series to coexist within the same universe. And I do want to say that Lee Cronin did talk about this himself in his after screening Q&A, so this is not just a fan theory that I have come up with. As I said at the start of this video, Evil Dead Rise is an absolute gore fest, and these characters go through absolute hell. In true Evil Dead fashion, Lee Cronin holds back no punches with this movie. In literally the opening minutes of the film, we see a character take a drone's rotary wing to the face, and there's also a scalping, which is just lovely. This movie certainly wastes no time. Speaking of time, the film is extremely well paced, but it seemed to really fly by to the point where I just wanted more. Now, that's not a negative critique of this movie. If anything, it's a compliment. I was just enjoying it so much, I wanted more from it. I have got to say though, if you're not great with gore, or like blood and guts and all that stuff makes you feel queasy, firstly, I don't really think an Evil Dead movie is for you, but this one is definitely more likely to make you walk out of that theatre. Especially those little cringe-inducing scenes of violence, like someone's earring being ripped out of their ear, or someone taking a cheese grater to the leg. Again, Cronin understood the assignment. Now, regardless of the over-the-top gore and violence which is splattered throughout this movie, there's certainly a lot of goofy scenes too, including that classic eyeball shooting into the mouth gag that pays a homage to Evil Dead 2. and some genuinely funny, over-the-top gore moments and dark comedy that is an absolute hallmark of the Evil Dead franchise. Cronin also explained in his Q&A that barely anything was left on the cutting room floor, and every grisly, terrifying idea that he could come up with basically made its way onto the screen, and that definitely shows. He also mentioned that nearly all the effects in the film were done practically, which again is not only extremely faithful and as much a part of the feel of an Evil Dead film as anything else, but the effects genuinely look absolutely incredible on the big screen. Now, naturally, Evil Dead Rise pays plenty of homages to the entries of the Evil Dead series that came before it, but it never becomes too much. If you're a big fan of the franchise, you won't find yourself pointing at the screen every 2 minutes going, "Oh, I get that reference," like a lot of modern sequels and reboots make us do. There is a decent amount of Easter eggs and hidden things sprinkled throughout the movie, but not all of them are overly obvious or really in your face. Hardcore fans of the franchise will certainly get a kick out of finding certain Easter eggs throughout the film, however, and I will say that some of them are very clever. That said, Evil Dead Rise also pays homages to other famous horror movies, especially Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. This is no more prevalent than in a scene featuring an elevator and gallons of blood. The cast of this movie, by the way, all do such a fantastic job. Alyssa Sutherland in particular gives an extremely unnerving, vicious and scary performance as the possessed mother. And I think it's safe to say that Deadite Alley is definitely the scariest Deadite we've seen so far throughout the entire Evil Dead franchise, which makes sense. Not my favourite, by the way. I think that will always be Ed or Henrietta from Evil Dead 2. Either or. One thing is for sure though, people who are easily frightened by horror movies are definitely not going to appreciate her performance in this film. And that's all the more reason to go and see it on the big screen. Additionally, Lily Sullivan, who plays Beth, gives a really likeable performance, and you truly root for her throughout the film. Not only to survive this nightmare that she's thrown in, but also to protect the children. One thing that I really did want to say about Evil Dead Rise is that it reminds me more of Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead film than anything else in the series. This is mainly because this movie feels a lot more raw than other Evil Dead entries, and despite still having its black comedy element, it certainly takes a more purely horror approach. Now, this is where my only critique of the movie might come into play. Just like in the original Evil Dead and in the 2013 reboot as well, the Deadites are the only monsters featured in the movie, and I wanted to see something really crazy, like a deer head laughing at our protagonist and other inanimate objects coming to life. I'm just a sucker for Evil Dead 2 ultimately. Now, that said, there is a scene in an elevator involving electrical wires, which is most certainly a callback to the most infamous scene in the original Evil Dead movie. If you're a fan, you know the one I'm talking about. So I guess my critique is kind of completely wrong, and Lee Cronin, you did an amazing job. It is completely understandable, however, why this movie wouldn't go too far over the top, because we would end up with something on the lines of Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness, instead of that more grueling experience of terror that Lee Cronin presents us with. Also, to give credit where credit is due, the movie goes completely in the realms of John Carpenter's The Thing in the final act, so there's certainly no shortage of body horror within this movie either. So in conclusion, Evil Dead Rise is a chaotic, gruesome thrill ride that stays faithful to the Evil Dead series while bringing us a whole new experience in grueling terror. Director Lee Cronin was the perfect man for this job, as being an Evil Dead fan since he was a child, he knew the perfect recipe to make an Evil Dead film, and clearly the perfect recipe to make fake blood, because it's been a while since I've seen so much of it. And oh my god, did he follow through and bring us an absolutely incredible movie. From the dark comedy to the truly horrific gore sequences, and also, most importantly, those moments of suspense and horror, the creative freedom that Cronin was allowed definitely pays off. And he has brought us a movie that stays true to what came before it, as well as pushing that bar even further, bringing us something completely new and sticking us right on that Horror Express elevator, up that apartment complex building, taking things to a whole new level. As a huge Evil Dead fan, I am more than happy with this new entry into the franchise, and I really could not recommend going to see this in the cinema enough. I also want to thank Lee Cronin for very kindly signing this mini poster or lobby card from the London premiere. I'm very proud to have this in my collection now, and thank you, Lee, for bringing us just an excellent Evil Dead movie. Sam Raimi certainly put this franchise into good hands, and I honestly can't wait to see what's next. Overall, there's really only one word to sum it up: groovy. And until next time, guys, take care.